Welcome back to the Elevated Coach podcast. I am your host, Joel Burgess. I am a leadership and business coach and the founder of the Elevated Coaching Collective. Now, in these earlier conversations, I wanted to speak to those that have had the greatest impact on me, my life, my business, and my relationships. So it's such a pleasure today to be speaking to a very close friend and amazing coach, David Chambers. David is a men's coach and a relationship coach. And in today's conversation, we speak about just that. We speak about the power of relational work and using relationships for our own personal growth. We speak about authenticity and how that's been totally misunderstood and how to be truly authentic. It's such a beautiful conversation. David is an amazing and very wise man, someone who I turn to often, and we've had many beautiful conversations over the past. So enjoy this conversation and let's get stuck in. Hey, David. So good to have you on today. And so a new tradition for this podcast has kind of taken inspiration from Stephen Bartlett is that the last guest asked the first question to the next podcast. And actually one of our good friends, Ben Bidwell, has this question for you. So we don't start off with anything shallow in this podcast. We go straight in. So Ben's question for you is, who have you learned to be and who are you really?
Man, who have I learned to be and who am I really? That's a fucking big question, that, eh? I have learned to be, the person I learned to be was like unfazed and unfeeling about what was happening around me. Like, I don't care, and I learned to be that way amongst difficult circumstances, but also, the place it really hardened my life more than anywhere was inside of relationship, because I didn't really feel, I didn't really express. So, a partner would be like, I'm leaving you. And I'd be like, meh, okay. And how that also hurt me in my professional life was I stayed in work that wasn't fulfilling to me because I didn't really feel the ache and pain of doing it. Like, it was there, but I couldn't feel it fully. And it took me a lot of years to feel it fully. And then when I felt it fully, it was kind of unbearable. I'd say to the point where, during COVID, it dropped me into like a depression, really, like doing what I was doing in that state. Like, it really was like, oh my God, this is the pain of doing what I don't like. And it brings me to something John Wineland said about purpose. And he was like, sometimes when the pain, we don't change unless like the pain is great enough for us to start to reorientate towards our purpose. And for me, it was very true for me. It was like the pain of doing what I was doing before, even though it was easy and it was like, I could have done it for the rest of my life. And many people will do a 9 to 5 in that sort of way for the rest of their lives and earn good money and stuff. For me, the pain of what felt so meaningless was too much for me to bear. And that kind of really spurred me to do something different. And then who am I really? I'm actually a very sensitive person. I'm a really sensitive person. I'm sensitive to my environments. I'm sensitive to people. Like, oh, how is the person in front of me? Sometimes I can just feel it like, they've had a lot going on in their life. Shit. There's a lot going on for them, and the old me wasn't as sensitive to that, or wasn't as responsive to that. I may just ignore it, but now I'm more responsive to that. Like, oh, the person in front of me has had a lot going on. They might need something, but let's be in the space with them and feel what that could be that I could bring through that doesn't feel like a burden for them or me to just, it might be a question. Who am I also really is, I'm also like really quite playful as a person. I'm often like, as you know, my partner now also is heavily pregnant. And one of the things we were saying earlier, I was like, oh my God, when we're really tired, are we going to like stop laughing? And she's like, do you really think you're going to stop making jokes? And I said, I doubt it. And I wonder sometimes if the world really sees me in that way. But like, I make a real effort in our home to like sometimes just do the stupidest things to bring a smile. So there's a real playfulness in my being that kind of comes through. And I'm also really passionate about kind of the evolution of mankind. That's something I actually care about, that I can see in the past I wouldn't have been like, it's not my problem.
Love that. Beautiful. I'm really curious because it feels like to me this unfazed is the polar opposite to the sensitive. And I wonder how that's kind of protected you almost from this really sensitive part to you.
Yeah, so by being unfazed, then nothing bothers you. You can't get hurt. It's like a big kind of invisible wall we can put around ourselves. I've said often to people, like, as I've felt more and gone through this journey of feeling more and being more sensitive to people, the hard thing can be is like, oh my god, I can feel a bit overwhelmed, or you can find yourself like in this kind of second guessing. Life often felt very clear when I was unfazed because I just did whatever I wanted to do, which sometimes was insensitive. But I didn't realize I was being insensitive unless it was said to me. And even then I could be insensitive enough to be like, that's not my problem. That's your problem. That's your thoughts. You should sort your thoughts out. But it protects you from pain. Being unfazed and uncaring protects you from pain. It protects you from sadness. It can protect you from, and when I say pain, I mean extreme pain and extreme sadness and extreme depression and so forth, because you're too numb or not connected to feel it. Now that can feel great if you're just happy living in this zone of like being okay, what I call like the 4 to 6 zone, like just middling all the time. But it also then means you lose out on the great joy. During those times when I was really unfazed, I didn't really get excited about anything, like excitement and joy. I see this for myself and I see this for the men I often speak to. It's like, it can be some of those hardest emotions for us as men, like excitement and joy, as if we're not allowed to. And I can definitely see that when I was far more unfazed, it's almost like, am I trying to be too cool, and not be too excited? Or am I trying to protect myself by not being excited? Am I trying to protect myself from disappointment? Because that's something I also experience. I've noticed in the last few years that disappointment really the ache of disappointment and the pain of it really gets me. So it's a fantastic protection mechanism, in a world that can feel quite harsh and unfeeling, to just have a wall up all the time. But it also blocks you off from the sort of connection and joy that we'd actually like to be experiencing and feeding other people. It actually makes us quite lonely as well. And I could definitely see there was a part in my life where I was like, I feel quite lonely. Even though I have all these people around me who, kind of know me, and I have all this beautiful house and I have this travels I'm all doing. But there was a moment where I was like, man, I feel incredibly lonely because I don't think I've really let that many people in.
Beautiful. Like what I'm really hearing is you shut out one emotion, one feeling, you're shutting out the equal and opposite. You're shutting out pain, you're shutting out passion and excitement. I don't know if they directly correlate, but and there is pain, there is power in pain, right? As you say, like it took you to feel that depression, that pain, to make massive change and look where you are now, right? There is power in pain, and I actually think the opposite of success is mediocrity. It is that 4 to 6. And if we don't feel that pain, as you say, we're quashing out the other end. So, like, if you could speak to that David who had the fallible, the sort of the unfazed protective mechanism, who was just fearful of pain and going there and feeling, like, what would you say to him? Because it is scary, right? Like it is really scary facing your feelings. And for most men, it's probably, I think, not all men, but like a lot of men, right? They need to feel more. And actually, it's a topic I'd love to explore with you, because there's a post on your Instagram that almost says the opposite, and I would love to explore that today. But what would you say to that David who was unfazed? But yeah, what would you say to him now?
I think I would have a conversation about what he sees himself missing out on. like just sit him down and have a look around the people who you see and like having these not necessarily great experience, but like really enjoying the simple things. You know, really being grateful for the food in front of them, or the small bits of company, or you know, the sunrise, and be like, doesn't that look enticing to feel that way? And I talked to him about the pain and the lessons of the pain and the lessons of his own pain, right? Because David 10, 12 years ago, he would have known the pain of his upbringing and the pain of his father not really being there. And a simple question of like, what have you learned from that? What have you really learned of how you can be as a man, how you can be as a person, and how you want to be? Even though you've experienced that pain, it's taught you some definite ways in which you would like to be, and some definite ways in which you don't want to be. And have a conversation about, what, as much as we don't want to experience pain, and part of us wants to avoid it, what could be the kind of gold and the magic that comes out of leaning into experiences that would create the opportunity for reaching the 0 and the 10, and have the possibility of that 10. Like, what's the possibility there? Because I think that's something I definitely see in my life. I was like, oh, let me not lean into this because the downside is too down. I know the upside is higher, but no, I don't like that downside. I'm just going to, almost take the conservative route through the middle.
I love that. It really brings up a question in me, and I'm just going to be open here and kind of talk about my experience with my coach, therapist, whatever you want to call her. Well, I think she calls herself a somatic coach. So there you go. But I find myself sometimes on these unbelievable highs where I feel elated, like pure joy, passion, like I feel unstoppable. And I sometimes wonder, like, is allowing myself to go to these heights creating the actual depths as well? And where that plays, like, where am I creating the suffering the other side? Like, sometimes I have days where I'm like, I'm really low, and I wonder if it's actually the attachment to the high that's actually creating the low, and it's just a curiosity there. And I don't know what you might say to me, or what you might kind of reflect back around that experience of these like epic highs and enjoying. Because some degree, Graham, who's been on a previous podcast, he said, we're kind of here to experience all the emotions. We're here to feel every emotion available to us. Like, that's what really life's about, actually. It is emotions and feeling. And it really landed on me. It's like, yeah, it's true. And by not allowing yourself to feel one, or allowing yourself to feel one, you have to be open to the other. And that's what I'm kind of hearing. And what you're sharing is you were resistant to the beauty, the joy, but in that you were shutting down the other.
Yeah. I think when you were speaking there about the kind of highs and the lows, it made me think of a coach that I had. I worked for a guy called William Whitecard for a while, and I was in his world and his work. And he talked about the pendulum a lot, the swing of the pendulum, right, in life, the kind of highs and lows. He called it the kind of pendulum. And he was like, life could be very turbulent when we are on the pendulum, because we're swinging from side to side. We're like, oh, this is really great. Oh my God, this is absolutely terrible. And he's like, it's actually really intense. And he's like, his theory was, you almost want to move up and be at the apex of the pendulum. Like, you experience the high, but also with the knowing, not just a pessimism, but a knowing that like this too shall pass, in the very Vipassana way, like, this too shall pass. Like, I can enjoy this, but almost don't. And I'm not sure how much I agree with this, because it sounds almost not necessarily stoic, but almost like suppressing. It's like, I'm not going to enjoy I'm not going to like fully give myself to this pleasure and this joy that I'm experiencing, because I know that this will also create the pain. But I think there's also, and this comes from some of the Vipassana, is like, there is a beauty in allowing oneself to be in, but not be consumed by. It's like, I'm feeling joy and I'm happy. Yeah. But I also know now that at some point in my life, I won't feel this way. And that's also okay. And that's the, I have the same thing. Like, when it swings the other way and you're like, oh man, nothing's going right, or he's a personal example right now. Like we bought a new car, and then there's some little warning lights came up on the car, and I was like, oh man, we just bought this car, it should be working. And I was lying in bed yesterday, and I was lying there, and I started to worry about it. Like, oh, what am I going to do? What's going to happen? And I stopped myself, and I just said, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Like, either the car is fixed and it's fine, or the car's not fixed, but it will be okay. Like, well, it's going to work out. And I feel like that's kind of moving off a little bit away from the pendulum of like, oh yeah, it's going to be okay. And I'm here now, and that's okay. But it's very difficult in the moment when we're in there, because it's just life, isn't it? It's intense. We get consumed. We get like completely brought in. But I think that moving in the high, is there a way to experience the high and really experience it fully? And also then when we get to the low, either allowing ourselves to feel it and just being with the fact that, oh, I'm feeling this, and I can give myself to it. It's okay. And, carry on with our day-to-day lives, our families and so forth. But holding the knowledge that we know that we will swing the other way.
Yeah, totally. It feels, that pendulum analogy feels very similar to the I think it's a Buddhist quote of, be the ocean, not the waves. It's like, oceans still have the ups and the downs, but they're not consumed by them. And I think it's that separation and non-attachment. And I think it is a little bit muddy for me, because I allow myself to get really consumed by certain things, and I really allow myself to really feel the like highs. If, for example, it's a music festival that I'm going to, speaking to our friend Ben, I don't get excited really by anything in the future. I'm just focused on the present, and I really allow myself to get excited by things in the future. But I know at the other side of that, there's suffering, because it's like, oh, it's been and gone. And there is a danger to that of creating equal suffering the other side. But at the same time, I love being excited for stuff. I love like the lead up to things and the excitement, and I'm like almost agitated about how excited I am. And then when I'm there, I'm just like, this is amazing. I'm all in. But the other side of that can be quite extreme at times. And what I've observed in myself though is that I allow myself to go there, and I don't stay there for too long. I think it's be a witness, not a protagonist. It's witnessing the emotions and feeling the emotions to its fullest, but not, as you say, like exaggerating with thought and story of why does this always happen to me and what have you. So I love this. I want to change the gear a little bit and actually talk about this word authentic, because your Instagram handle is the authentic man, and it kind of feels aligned to Ben's question, right? Who are you, and who are you really? And I feel like this word authentic is a bit of a buzzword right now, and I think actually it's created a lot of problems for people actually, and it's almost like a protective mechanism from like truly being authentic. So I'm really curious as to like what authentic means to you.
It's a really, such a word, because it can say like, oh, it's being true to yourself, it's being yourself. And then we get into like, what is the self? What is being myself being? Can I ever not be myself? Or am I only ever being myself? Or am I being more of some of the edgier self bits, like the self that's, like the question is like the self I was taught to be, because that part of that is part of my authenticity as well. That is a aspect of me, that is a side of who I am. I guess it's more and more is like, how am I bringing myself into each moment and bringing as much of who I am that is possible, in that moment, instead of where we can go, oh, I'm in this moment with Joel now on this podcast, and like, oh, I can't, this part of me isn't allowed to be here, or that part isn't allowed to be here. That's inappropriate. And it's like, how much are we doing that in our lives, in our day-to-day lives, in our conversations? And I think that's what really erodes our authenticity. And then my mind then goes to like, oh yeah, but surely there's moments where we can't be authentic. And there are moments where we can't be authentic. We can't be. You know, it might be in danger to our lives to say the thing that's really there for us. Or you can be authentic, but, you know, it may endanger your life. It may endanger your family's life and so forth to be your full authentic self. And I think that's part of the human existence, that sometimes we have to dampen part of ourselves. You know, I'm reminded of years ago when I worked in the corporate world. There was one weekend, my boss, I saw him on a Friday. He came into the office and he was like, hey, he's like, oh, David, what are you up to this weekend? And I went, oh, yeah, me and my girlfriend, we're going to a tantric massage course. And he was absolutely, he didn't know what to say. He just kind of stopped completely and stopped completely. He was like, oh, nice. And then talked about something else. And that was just like authentically and truthfully was there. And I still feel that, you know, in the same position, I would say the same thing. But could I put that bit of information in a way that was more digestible for him, that he could take on and that we could then actually have a conversation with? You know, if I said, oh, we're going on a massage course for the weekend, me and my partner, there's something we really want to do. That also is part of my authenticity because I want to bring him into the conversation. You know, it's a very fine line, this authenticity, because I think we can then use it as a way to be mean and cruel to people. Be like, oh, I was just being my authentic self. But there's also part of our authentic self that is kind and caring and considerate to other people and other humans. But we've also got to be mindful that we're not living in a way that is for others, you know, people pleasing, for instance. You know, and I think it's just a very fine line, authenticity. And, you know, people have written books about it, and, you know, books and books and books on it. But it's like I see it more as a moment by moment experience. It's like, how true was I in that moment? Like, I'm talking to someone, what am I hiding in this moment that, oh my God, there's a part of me that's like, I don't know what authenticity is. I just think it's so complex. But also, I also have an inner knowing of like, oh yeah, I do have an inkling of what authenticity is, because I know what it's not as well. And sometimes it's one of those cases that we can work out what it is and what it's not.
I love that. It brings so many things. One thing that kind of comes up is the idea of maturing your ego. So I think, you know, ego has been demonized, right? And because it creates most of our suffering. But actually, the ego is incredibly smart, and it's brought us to where we are right now. And I still think there's a place if we can mature our ego. And I think that example was perhaps an example of a maturing ego. It's actually, in this case, perhaps to make this person feel. I'm aware of that word, make this person feel. So, but I wonder if that resonates with you, or it's just a thought I had of like, is that kind of a mature ego?
Yeah. It's interesting you say ego, because I'm going to kind of go back to William Whitecloud again. He has this idea that and it's a pretty common idea, that our ego is like something that is formed to both protect us and give us direction in the world. In a world that is complex and confusing, our ego is formed to give us an understanding of like, who am I in a world that is really lacks separation, to give us some boundaries of who I am and not others. But the problem is that it takes on a lot of fears and misjudges and misguides us in many ways, because it's only obsessed with survival. So if we can mature our ego beyond the thinking of survival, we start to think less just about I, and we start maybe thinking more about we and I. And it makes me also think of, you know, so many people are like, I want to smash my ego, I want to destroy my ego, I want to be egoless. I want to be like I want to be enlightened and so forth. And, you know, even those who have reached enlightenment, you know, I think about a book I read, and I can't think of the name of the guy. And he's written a couple of books about his journey to enlightenment and to like, but he says he still has to then inhibit it. He still has to enter into his ego to exist in the world, to like go and do his. So he's like, I have to step into myself and my ego to go shopping and get the groceries, because I still need to function in this world. If I just was in this state of like, there is no me and there is no I, it's very hard to function in the world we live in. But yeah, I like this maturing. I like what you said about maturing ego. It's like, okay, how do we take it out from being so maybe childish and small and fearful. And it's like an integration, isn't it? It's like an integrating our ego into the more expansive part of us.
I love that. Yeah. I also, a lot of what you say around this being authentic. I love this. Am I bringing all parts of me online? And it brings this visualization of actually these parts of us that we can develop. Like, we are growing beings. And I think the word authentic sometimes, well, I feel like there's a danger that it's a fixed thing. Like, this is authentically me, and it's fixed, like as if it's not a changing, evolving self. Like, I could have once said writing isn't authentic to me, or public speaking is not authentic to me, because I once hated it and I was once fearful of it. And I could have used that word authentic probably to protect myself. And I think it's potentially what people do with that word authentic. It's not true to me. But what I'm hearing potentially is this idea of it's bringing all the parts of ourselves on board, and we are constantly developing different parts of us. And it kind of brings up the question of, do we find ourselves, or do we create ourselves, or do we discover ourselves, or do we create ourselves? I've always been in the mind of we create ourselves. You know, we have a vision of who we want to be, and we go and create that version versus the discovery. And I know it's totally nuanced, and there's no right or wrong with this. But this idea of adding parts or bringing more of us online, sort of, it brings the visual to me of that we're expanding, and we're expanding our roles, and we're expanding our authentic self, I suppose. Excuse me for interrupting the show, but I wanted to ask you, have you subscribed yet? I ask because this is a brand new podcast, and it will really help me out in my mission to spread coaching as far and wide as possible. I truly believe that coaching can change the world, and your simple subscription helps me out more than you realize. So thank you for your help in advance. And if you feel like this episode might help a friend out or another coach, then go ahead and share it. Thanks in advance, and let's get back into the show.
Yeah, as you say that, what comes to me is I think of like shadow work as a practice of shadow work is a finding process, because these things are already there. They're just, we can't see them, we can't access them because somewhere we suppressed or hidden them. And then I think of shadow work, and I'm like, oh, well, that's a finding, you know, that we're looking back through the kind of the old parts of us that are there, and we're like, oh God, there's this, like you, I had a fear of writing. I'm dyslexic, so when I was a kid, everyone would tease me for my writing at school. I was called stupid. I never wanted to write in front of anybody, and all these things. But there was a part of me before all of that was freely expressing myself in whatever way. I used to draw stuff. I remember drawing things when I was like 5-7 years old, and like giving them to friends as gifts. I remember writing at school and so forth, right? Expressing myself in that way. And then I had all this stuff put on me, dyslexic, stupid, can't write, don't write, all that. So then going and writing for me is like partly a finding process of finding that part of me and bringing that through. But also a creative process in like expanding into the new. So, it's a cop-out answer to say, I think it's kind of both. There's both a finding and there's a creating, because there's a conscious creating that's going forward. And then there's a finding because there's what's come before, or what is already there, almost peeling back some of the weight that's on there, the layers, or I like to call it like ash. When a volcano explodes, it spreads ash all across the land around it. And so much of what I think is important for us to do is to clear the ash and allow what was there to come through, and to the grass to grow and so forth, because we've so much has been put on top of us, the fears, the worries, the anxieties, the beliefs, and all sorts. And that's what clouds the self from coming through, or the more expanded self, which can then really be creative in what we want, because there's our conscious decision about what we want to create. But then there's also what's already experienced often needs the dusting off and to be found and brought, and to be brought into the light. And so why I'm a big fan of shadow work or inner child work for that, because we're carrying this stuff already, and it's weight, holding us back. And sometimes we can be as creative as we want going forward, but we've still got these like 10-ton weights holding us back. And we need to go into that and go, oh God, yeah. I'm going to bring in a conversation I had with a man literally an hour ago. And for example, he said, when people, if he gets really excited when he's talking and he starts to talk really fast. And if someone stops him, he gets really deflated. And we kind of unpacked it. And what we got to was that when someone asks him to slow down and stop, because he's talking very quickly and quite intensely, he takes that as that he's stupid and that he's not intelligent and he doesn't want to talk anymore. And he removes himself. And that story he has there is nothing to do with the person in front of him. And it's all to do with his past experience of himself. And if he can go back and take that little child him and go, hey, or speak to that child him and go, oh, wait a minute. No, actually, it's not that you're stupid. It's just that like some people only can take on information at a certain speed. It's not about you. You're wonderful and bright as you are. Like if you can be more present to the moment with that person, then that connection can grow and you could have a beautiful conversation. So that's where I see like the finding piece being very important. But I think we are very active in creating ourselves consciously or unconsciously and who we want to be in the world and with people.
Yeah, I love that. I think, I think the man you were speaking to an hour ago could well have been me. I get way too excited sometimes when I speak and often get slowed down. But I certainly have a tendency to live in the future. It's both a gift. I can see things and I can plan, and I can structure, and I can create these amazing visions. But really in the last year or two, I've always been like, why would I need therapy? Like my past is great. And, I don't need therapy. I'm all about creating. And I can personally say that I think everyone needs a therapist. Everyone needs to go back into their past. And as you say, like dust away and reveal what's there. And it's really hard to like quantify and put it down to therapy, because with coaching, right, you're building plans and you're actioning and you're creating, and it's far clearer as to like the output of coaching. All I can say is by working with therapists over the last 2 years, far more of me is online. And I'm far less reactive. I'm more present. I'm more joyful. I'm more able to hold space for others. Just far more of me is in line. And I'm a far better business person as well. My coach and mentor, a guy called Dan Bolton, he said, you don't have a business problem, you have a personal problem showing up in your business. And I think most entrepreneurs and coaches, they need a business coach and they need a therapist. and they work in tandem, right? Because in the moving forward, you find out what triggers you find out where your edges are, your fears are, and in that's essentially a tool for awareness to go, right, why is this part triggering me, and then working through that and sort of integrating that into yourself. And I'd love to kind of shift the gears a little bit and talk about how you like your coaching and your work, because again, I've had this insight in the last 2 years. Is actually probably a conversation we had a few years ago, and I cringe almost at how naive I was about what you did as a relationship coach. And I've had this insight in the last few years. It's like, we cannot do this alone. Everything is relational. Everything is, and particularly the retreat I went on last year of the insight around everything's a mirror. It's like, everything's a mirror. It's like, everything's a mirror. And it's why I think, what you do is just so freaking powerful, because relationships is really where the fruit of life is, right? It's where the juice of life is, but it's also the biggest tool for awareness and opportunity for growth. So I would just love for you to talk to like how you use relationships to help men who you work with to grow. And I know it's a very big question, but
yeah, I'm going to just say one thing before I answer the question is some of the deepest work I've had to do with myself is growing my business. Yeah.
Oh, mate.
because I've had to face the money stuff, which will always be there for me from childhood, and putting yourself out in the world. As you said, like that stuff there, putting yourself, like growing a business and putting yourself out into the world, it will bring up so many of our own personal wounds. And the second place that brings up a lot of wounds is relationship, because like that's where we're wounded the most, right? Through relationship, through our parenting, through our early relationship, our early experiences of connection. So how do I help men grow through relationship? I'm covering more of themselves, the authenticity piece. So many of my conversations with men are around like, oh no, I can't do that. Oh, well, why can't you do that? Or I don't do that. I don't do that. I love that. I don't do that. That might be in intimacy, like, oh, if I try and seduce my wife, like, oh no, it will go wrong. There's a mistake there. And it's like, well, actually, what's underneath that thought? What's underneath the feelings? Like, what's the felt experience you're having now? Oh, it's that I'm going to get rejected. And when that happens, it means this about me. When did you, start to inquire about when that kind of first happened? Because then there's a freedom. Oh, I become free from this, from making this emotion mean something about what I can and can't do, or I should or shouldn't do. That creates a little bit of freedom there, or a lot of freedom, and depending on what area of relationship it is. And then there's also communicating. When we work on how we communicate, then we start having the capacity really to get what is on our mind and have that land with other people, resonate with other people. So it's like there's a lot of, and then there's this that weaving of confidence as well, because confidence is such an integral part of how we relate to people. Because when we feel confident in ourselves, we're actually thinking less. We think less about what we should say or shouldn't say, what we shouldn't do or don't do. We just trust in it's a trust, really. Like confidence is like a self-trust, like a moment by moment self-trust. Can I trust myself in this moment, that when I'm with my partner and I go into the front room and I say something to her, that's going to be received? But if I don't trust that, then I don't have confidence. Then I start second guessing myself. Then I don't really express myself. Then I'm overthinking, and my relationship feels a bit flat, or feels a bit dud, and then maybe it starts to fall apart. So there's the authenticity of like bringing more of who they are through, bringing play and so forth, and then all those things that are expanding in their relationship expand outside in their lives. Quite a few of my clients say they come to me for relationship stuff, and then somehow midway through we're talking about their businesses, and we're talking about how they interact with their clients. I can think of one of my clients from before, actually, when he came to me, he used to worry a lot about his business, and I think it was pretty successful, and we worked together for 6 months, a year, probably about a year. And this is probably one of the most beautiful stories, actually, one of the ones I'm kind of personally proud of. He came to me and he was in a relationship that was completely sexless. They hadn't had sex for a number of years. We worked together for a year and things had really improved. Like love was flowing between them. Emotions were being expressed. Communication was at a great level, all these things. And towards the last few months, he was like, man, we're so close to this intimacy, like the whole intimacy, the whole package of intimacy, the different strands and types of intimacy were really flowing in the relationship. And one day he came on the call to me and he was smiling, and I was like, hey, how's things? He was just like, it's really good. And I was like, oh, tell me what's happened. He was like, we had sex and it was absolutely magical and beautiful. And he, I had tears in my eyes because, you work with someone for a while and you see them move through from like relationship on the brink of falling apart, like absolute close to collapse, not knowing what to do. And you see them, a year later, and a year sounds like a really long time, but there was just a lot of work to put in. And obviously I was only speaking to him and not also his partner. And to see his face, they, having beautiful intimacy and sex. And I'm recommending all these tantric books to him to read, and so they can expand it even more. But by that, his business was flourishing more because he was more in communication with people. He was less afraid of pitching for work. He was less afraid of asking for what he needed. There was less fear for him around even, publicly. He had some of his some furniture he designed publicly displayed in a design museum in London. And he's like, before I would have had so much judgment about myself, I wouldn't have allowed myself to do those things. So the why I, the relational growth is so important is because, hey, we get wounded in relationships. That's what happens. We have wounds from relationship, from our own personal ones and our families, but also because it touches on every aspect of life. Everything's, like you said, everything's relational. Can I be in a relational moment with somebody where I look deep into their eyes and I'm allowed myself to feel myself and feel them? If I can't do that and I'm always breaking connection in these very tiny ways, looking away, disconnecting from what I feel, overthinking and so forth, then that little thing there, I'm doing that hundreds of times a day, potentially, depending on what sort of work you're in. So if I can improve that 5-10%, then that's going to improve 100 of my interactions each day. And like what the compounding of that can be really profound for people.
Love that. It reminds me, there's a saying or something like that in Buddhism where the divine is in the mundane. And I'm really hearing that in actually, there's so much opportunity in these seemingly mundane experiences or moments with our partner. I remember when I very first started working with Graham, who's again been on this podcast, I think it was around 3 years ago. And I remember reading this quote of the divine is in the mundane. And I didn't really know what to talk to him about one day. So I brought to the table the anger that I felt when my wife didn't do the dishwashers. And I know, like, saying that out loud, like, I'm incredibly ashamed to say that out loud, right? But it was real. Like there was real anger there. And I acted like a little petulant child. I was like this stroppy teenager. But I just thought it was a mundane thing. So I put it to the side. But one session I read this quote, the divine is in the mundane. So I brought it to the session. And there was such a powerful breakthrough in that moment. Like I won't go into the details of it, but it's such a powerful breakthrough. And interestingly, what it allowed me to do was create space. So the next time it happened, I experienced the anger and I probably got angry at her, but I did it with awareness and then said sorry. And the next time it happened, I got angry. I was aware of the anger, but didn't do anything with it. Felt it, took myself away, didn't do anything about it. The next time, and you can see how this goes, right? And like every time it happened, and by the 3, 4, 5 weeks later, right, I was just doing the dishes myself. And this is not to say, and there was no feeling at all. There was no anger. And I actually could suddenly see my wife's perception. And I could see her side of like, you're dealing with a 1-year-old. Maybe dishes were the last of your priority. And I know this is really embarrassing for me to say out loud, but and now I'm very proud of myself, of like the dad and husband I am, and I'm very active around the house, and I don't believe in the sort of the traditional roles, but that was a conditioning in me, and that was part of this anger. And I think, and that one experience, I just know with certainty has like expanded across my life in so many different ways, because I've been able to go through that experience of bringing awareness to it. Next time, bringing the awareness to it and not reacting. Next time, and it just, next time it's sort of not having the not feeling the anger and growing through and integrating the feeling. So I could so see this idea of these little interactions in relationships going beyond just, it's super powerful. I love that.
Yeah, as you described there, and it's those little things, isn't it, that we notice, as those little bits of conditioning we have about what, how things should be, how things should be. And it's really, there's, like you said, to describe the process, like, we love, I think, in coaching to talk about like big breakthroughs. Like one moment I used to feel the anger, and then the next moment it was gone and never happened again. But it actually, it's more gentle than that. It's like,
Totally.
it's the person who procrastinates for the whole day and they're learning and they're growing. And then the next week they only procrastinate for a few hours. And then the week after they only procrastinate for like 30 minutes or so, and then they get down to only a few seconds. You know, it's like a slow process, like instant rapid transformation. I'm not sure if I really believe in it, because things happen slowly. We're kind of, you know, sensitive beings. We shift slowly through our emotions. Like we might have a realization that's mental, but the kind of physical and emotional side can take some time to break in a new groove.
Totally. I think that expectation of it happening rapidly creates a lot of trouble in the mind and in ourselves. I don't know about you, but I've had moments in this journey of, am I growing? Like sometimes even feeling like I'm going backwards.
Yeah.
And I actually realized that's just increased awareness and raised awareness. And I was driving yesterday and I had a moment of like, wow, I'm actually really proud of who I've become. And I haven't felt that for a long time. I'm not reactive anymore with my wife. I'm like, oh, I can hold space for her now and see her. Like I had a moment that I am growing, but it can sometimes feel like we're not at all. It can feel like sometimes we're going backwards. I don't know if you have experience there or anything to speak to, but it's real.
Oh my God, I feel like this all the time. I feel like it all the time. You know, I go through bouts of being like, oh my God, I'm being super distracted all the time. I'm getting distracted by this and that and blah, blah, blah. Or I'm not like as present as I used to be. I go through exactly the same thing. And, you know, even hearing you say there about awareness, it's like, oh, actually, it's just I'm even more aware of these things now. Like, oh, I'm just more aware. Or, you know, I wonder sometimes with myself, you know, especially in the last year, I can see where my growth has really gone in certain areas. Like, you know, you talk about reactivity and, you know, I was very reactive around, for instance, the topic of having children. It just brought up so much feeling and emotion for me. Like, oh, you know, me and also we talk about it and I'd be like, my throat was tight. I didn't know what to say. I was almost stuttering. And like last year, that was kind of my work of like, oh shit, I want to be more and more okay with this thing because this is a thing I want to do and go down. And then I can see with this area, it's like, oh, that doesn't exist anymore. That's not there. That whole trigger, fear, anxiety, wanting to run away, wanting to escape, wanting to blow up situations in doesn't exist anymore, you know? But it's hard when as we're on the journey, it's so easy to forget like 4 or 5 steps back, 6, 7 steps back,
Totally.
you know? We can just think, I'm not growing. You know, I think I probably tell myself that monthly at least at some way that I'm like, oh my God, I wish I was back there when I was like waking up every morning and all I would do is like get out of bed, go and make my tea, sit on my meditation mat, sit for an hour, like not flinch. And then I think, am I romanticizing those moments in the past? Was it really like that?
Totally can so resonate. I want to just shift the gear final time. Speaking on the topic that's obviously very close to you, you mentioned the evolution of manhood being something close to your heart. So I'd love to speak on this topic around masculinity. And I know there's a whole can of worms. And so I want to just focus in on actually a post that's on your Instagram. And I mentioned earlier this idea of men feeling more. And there's a post that almost kind of says the opposite, right? So I'm really curious as to get your thoughts behind it. So it said the post is, some men don't need to be more vulnerable, open, caring, sensitive, and feeling. Some men need to have better boundaries, develop emotional discipline, fuller self-expression, deal with conflict head on, make themselves a priority, and claim their personal power.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to speak to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's this, that there's a range of men. You know, I think we always think of men as like cold and unfeeling and not expressive. And those men do exist. They're out there. You know, I was definitely one of those men. And there's actually then a range of men who are almost too in their feelings and their moment by moment feelings. And this is a really key piece. They're like moment by moment feelings are dictating every aspect of their life. They're not guided by anything that's deeper or greater than them. It's just like, oh my God, this morning I don't want to get out of bed. I don't feel like it. I'm staying in bed. But they might have a commitment to, you know, showing up for work or showing up for their partners. And then the reactivity is also part of it. Like, because they're so in their feelings, they're just reactive. Or when conflict comes, they run away. or they allow people to tread all over them because they're so in their feelings and not committed to like actually the boundaries, the kind of what you might call the kind of masculine work. And I guess through my practice, I meet a lot of these guys who I'm like, just because you feel sad today doesn't mean you can just sit around and eat ice cream, right? Okay, sometimes we all feel sad, that's okay, but you're also committed to something greater than you. You know, that might be your business, that might be your partner, and you can feel those feelings for a bit, but to wallow in them for weeks on end may not be productive to who you are. And there's a fine balance and a range. There's a range because there's no balance in the middle of like having this perfect balance of masculine and feminine, which is like this androgynous way of being that I learned about in Tantra is like the perfect balance. We need to be able to kind of move across the range depending on the moment, depending on the situation. You know, I use an example of like the moment your child is born, for instance. If all you've ever done is be in your masculine your whole life, like stoic, unfeeling, and you know, strategic, and you know all these things, the child's going to come out and you're going to kind of look and you're going to very sternly and quietly maybe speak, but that moment requires you to feel deeply into what is there for you, you know, and you might move into really being in your feelings in that moment and being like, oh my God, I'm so overjoyed and I'm excited for the life that, you know, we're going to live together. I'm going to show you these things. But if we don't have the range to go there, then that is like a disability to us, or the reverse. If we are so in our feelings and we're so in the flow of things, and how are we going to create something that's meaningful to us through planning and strategy in life? So it's finding the kind of the awareness to know where to be on your range based on the moment and the situation.
Yeah, I love that. It really brings the idea of learning that I've had recently around just like facing the opposite. You know, so I'm doing an embodiment course right now, and we're using 4 elements as a tool for archetypes, and I'm very much earth and fire, structure and action. You know, like I'm a warrior, love structure. So I'm going in the opposite. So I'm now doing improv, which is a water, and dance, which is kind of, and I'm feeling the range of what it's like to be both sides. And I think that's what I'm hearing is actually this is how we evolve and grow, is we increase our capacity and our range. It was quite funny. Yesterday I had the improv class at 10 a.m. Like I miss nothing. I know minute to minute where I'm meant to be, right? Yesterday I was having a coffee at 10:30 going, I think I'm supposed to be somewhere. And I was a complete airhead, you know, and it's quite funny we use that word airhead, right? I was complete airhead. And then at 4 p.m. the email came afterward and said, hey, this is the session notes. I was like, that's where I was meant to be. And I emailed Liz, who was the instructor, and said, it's rubbing off because I never miss anything, but I'm feeling way more airy. And I think this is kind of something you're talking to, but I'm really curious as to like how you help men experience that range and decipher like where they're meant to be on that range, because it sounds like a lot, right? On one end we're saying like, you know, men, you've got to be strong, have a strong backbone and have a purpose and support and have this emotional discipline. On the other end it's like, but you need to feel, and it sounds like a lot. It's a big ask. How do you help men experience that range and like decipher where they're meant to be in that moment on that?
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's really personal to the man. And, you know, I work in groups as well with men. So you have to you have men at different point that their kind of natural place is to be at different parts of that range. So there's some men that if you said, okay, we're going to do some work around integrity, right? We're going to do an integrity list and we're going to like get really clear on like how we're out of integrity, for instance. Some men are going to like, oh, great structure, I'm all in. And they flourish in that, right? It feels home for them. And other men will be like, who are more, you know, loose and flowy, you know, even like myself is like more like water, more going with how things are going to be like really resistant to that. And it's also speaking to that, like where there's resistance, there's gold, there's learning and there's gold for you, right? And talking into the like, do you see the benefit in like this integrity list, for instance? Like what would it bring you if you were very clear on where in your life you're out of integrity? Like, would that create calm in your mind and so forth? It's like, yeah, great. Okay. They can see the benefit. And then there's the kind of other side where, men who want to feel more and be more in flow, right? And even be more present. It might be through movement. It might be through breath, slowing them down as well, slowing them down and getting them to actually feel the sensations in their body through talking about the experience they have or having, through talking about what it does to their body. So they might be talking about, oh man, I'm having a difficult time with my partner, right? So when you talk to me about that, what's going on? What sensations do you feel? Oh, I feel a tightness in my chest, my throat closes up, and I've had, when you give men a little bit of guidance on how to get in contact with what they feel, because it's really a feeling of sensation, and you give them the language of the words, right, or the emotional will, then they can open up and express themselves way better. It's just, they have the tools. So it's really bringing men through practices that allow them to move along that range and see what's easy and comfortable for them, and see what's uncomfortable and difficult or feels unnatural. Because I just believe there's always, for that expansion and for that growth, is like moving into these new territories. It's like exploring new territories of yourself. Like, oh, this territory, I don't know it, but how I can expand into that and experience that, and I can see that there's benefit in that. So yeah, it is a lot. I think it's a big ask. I think men, as you said, it's a big ask. I think the modern man is being asked to do something that's never really been asked for before in history. He's still being asked to do a level of protection, providing, and procreation. That's still something that's on there, but he's also being asked to nurture, to feel, to have empathy for, and I think we're not necessarily the first generation, because there's generations before. You read books like Fire in the Belly by Sam Keen, but I think that we are one of the first generations that really we have the tools in place to have us do that, and we have enough, like a critical mass of men around us in the world that are like, this is great, and the research has come out now and stuff about. So I think we're at a point in history where we're kind of equipped to be able to have that range and bring it to the world, and the world is asking for it. The world is crying out for men of range more and more and more.
Yeah, totally. To some degree, catching up with women, I think. I went to Medicine Festival last year, and it was 70-80% women, and I was like in awe of them, because they were entrepreneurs. They're incredibly successful in their business, but then also this super nurturing, beautiful women who are fully in their feminine and able to dance and connect with some. I was like, wow, we need to catch up. We need to catch up. And the one learning I would say is something that's really helped me, and my previous mentor of mine, Graham, who said there's no growth without tension, which is kind of what you said. Where there's resistance, there's gold. And one thing I learned in that retreat, and I did a 6-month mentorship with him and a guy called Robbie, was lean into where you feel repelled, lean into that. So we had this exercise of actually saying who repelled us in the group, and we would then put in groups with the person that we were repelled by, and the person I was repelled by had so much medicine for me. There was so much growth, and we actually became really good friends. It was funny on the retreat itself. The first guy I met, this guy, long hair, he was wearing a dress, and immediately I was like, not for me. And I'm again a little embarrassed to say this out loud, right? But I was like, not for me. This guy's not for me. Anyway, he's sitting next to me in the bus, and then we got put together in rooms, and I turn up to the room, and I was like, oh my word, you are joking. Like, this is me before the retreat, by the way. So again, I'm super embarrassed by sharing this, and then we drew something from nature, and it determined who our buddy was for the week. Guess who was my buddy? Same guy. So first person I met, same person I met, same my room, and we were then buddies. I was like, okay, there's something in this. Like, the universe is trying to tell me something here. and we became so freaking close. And we were exactly what each other needed. Like he needed structure, and he needed abilities to systemize things, and I needed like his sensitivity and his flamboyance and his expression. And we basically spent a week together. He was such medicine for me, and it was just the most beautiful lesson that wherever you feel repelled, wherever you feel tension, whoever you feel repelled by has something for you. There's something in them that either hasn't been fully integrated or is showing you something. So it's just been very, very profound, this idea of the tension and resistance.
Yeah, it's a really powerful thing. And I think of a conversation I had with a friend of mine, and we were talking about Donald Trump, and she was just like so angry about him. This was a number of years. And I was like, what traits do you need to take from Donald Trump? And she was like, there's nothing I can learn from that man. I said, no, really? I was like, let's look deeper at it. Like, okay, yeah, he's, but what was it? And then when we really got into the conversation, I wasn't even coaching at this point. I just was really curious. And she's like, well, he really just says what he wants to say, and he is following, he can be quite ruthless. And I'm a bit of a pushover actually in my work. And, it's actually hurt me. And she pulled out a few traits from him. And I said, you see, there may be some things that you just don't want. But like you said, there's a medicine there. If we were willing to look close enough, there's something for us to take that we can take on and for our own growth and expansion. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I remember Alistair Gray once saying, what you see in others exists in you. And that's both medicine and quite hard sometimes. Like, wow, when you really believe that, it's like, that's quite uncomfortable sometimes. This has been beautiful. There's a quick fire round of questions that I want to kind of complete with. And the first is, you're a dad. June is your little one due? Yeah. The first quick fire question is, what kind of dad do you want to be?
I want to be really involved, present, playful, with boundaries, encourage freedom and confidence. And what else comes to me? I also want to be someone that, my boy can come to talk to. Like he can come to me and talk to me about things. And I know there'll be a point in life where he won't do that. But, when he gets older, that he knows he can come and talk to me about virtually anything, like not to feel like, oh God, I can't, if I talk to my dad about that, I'm going to be told off. I want to be open. Open. Yeah. Open is the word.
Beautiful. I can sense there's some excitement there. I'm excited for you. What advice would you give the version of you that just started coaching?
Don't stick to the rules.
Yes. Love it. Don't stick to the rules. And what advice would your future self give you now? Say you in 10 years.
My future self in 10 years would probably tell me not to be so hard on myself.
And what would you call the last chapter of your life?
This last chapter of my life has been, the thing that kind of came to me is, there it is. It's stepping into what I believed was not possible.
Beautiful. And what do you think the next chapter of your life will be called?
Sleeplessness.
Yeah, tired.
Tired. Very tired.
Yeah.
Very tired. I think also is going to be, I think the next chapter is going to be, it's just newness. Newness is going to be a lot of firsts, a lot of newness. Yeah.
The final question for you is, what is your favorite coaching question?
Favorite coaching question. Simple one, I think, is what do you make that mean about you?
So good. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, beautiful. Well, David, it's been such a pleasure. I wanted my first podcast to be with people that have impacted me the most in my recent years on this journey in coaching. And whilst I've never worked with you as a client of yours, we're good friends, and we've had such beautiful conversations. You've seen me in the ups, the lows, and I've learned a huge amount from you, and particularly your presence and your groundedness and your ease and just your wisdom as well. So very grateful, and I'm very confident that one day that I will work with you and you can fix all my relationship problems. I joke. I only say that because I know my wife will be listening to this.
She's going to listen. Oh, it's just,
Yeah.
I'm lucky.
No, but we've both grown so much from, you know, being good friends with you and Ossa. Seriously, so our relationship's in a far better place. We're in a beautiful place, and you've actually had a big part to play in that. So yeah, thank you for that too.
Oh, my pleasure. You know, it's been a pleasure, you know, getting to know each other. We lived in Madeira together as well. And, you know, you have so many of these traits that I often struggle with, you know, discipline and structure and so forth. And it's been, you know, I know you from multiple angles, both as friends, and then I've been inside of your coaching program. It's been, you know, to also see you in that element is a joy, and so much wisdom for especially coaches like myself who are probably coaches, like gifted in coaching and directing people, but lacking the ability to like systemize and create structure and organize and all those things that are just needed for business. You know, it's been, you know, this last couple of months has been, you know, really, really amazing for me. You know, when I messaged you the other day, like just after one conversation we had for 90 minutes, like I was in turmoil with my business, feeling like I wanted to give up. And I, you know, got off the call from you, and that like everything I've taken from there has just created so much clarity for me in the last few months. So yeah, man, like it's been very bi-directional.
Epic. As all good relationships will be, and it's just the start. Man, thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Just stay with me for one more minute because I have two things to share. The first is, if you're looking for support in growing your coaching business and becoming more powerful in your coaching, then go ahead and join my free community. The link is below. And then secondly, if you enjoyed today's episode, please go ahead and leave a review on whatever platform you're on. Again, this helps me out more than you know, and it's truly my mission to spread coaching as far and wide as possible, because I really believe that coaching can change the world. And your review, your subscription, your like goes so far in helping me in that mission. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode. I've got some amazing guests planned, so keep your eyes and your ears peeled. See you very soon.